Hey, are you a solopreneur and frankly just tired of doing everything yourself? Have you tried hiring somebody, but you had a real bad experience? Or maybe you've hired and you had a good experience. Either way, team building can be a real beneficial thing to growing your business. It's also one of the most stressful things that you can do in a business. And so in this episode, our goal is to demystify and unpack this ugly word of hiring and show you how team building can be super strategic in your growth. And so welcome to the Shift Podcast. I'm Evan Weiland with my co-host Matt Ware, and we are recording in this really cool space, the Clock Tower in downtown Denver. Matt, hiring is easily one of the biggest topics in entrepreneurship. So where do we even start?
Well, I think if we are going to take the advice of Simon Sinek, he would say start with why, right? Everything has to start with why. So I would answer that question is, whether it's hiring or team building or frankly, anything else in your business, you have to start with the why. You have to know, why am I doing this? Why am I moving forward in this? And, from my standpoint, when it comes to this idea of hiring and building your team, you better get the why right. Okay, if you don't have the why right on the front end, it's going to be super problematic down the road. And, people might have different views of this, but they can start their own podcasts. My view of this is that there's really only one right answer for why you are building your team and hiring people, and that is because you want to grow. If you don't want to grow your business, don't hire people, and don't hire people unless you want to grow, period. That is what building a team is all about. And I'm talking about whether you're building your first team, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 people, or you're talking about hundreds or thousands of people in a massive corporation. You are hiring to grow. And any other reason, take it from me, because I've done this before, any other reason is going to cause issues and problems down the road. Now, in saying that, I don't mean that every new team member automatically contributes to top line revenue growth in your business, right? Because different positions do different things, right? If you're hiring salespeople, you might see the direct impact of that with revenue growth. If you're hiring an accountant or a janitor, you may not see that. But the point is, no matter what their role is, they contribute to the growth of the organization, or you're bringing them on because the organization is growing. So if you are a solopreneur and you're hiring your first team member and they're just going to be a virtual assistant for 10 hours a week, right? The mindset still has to be, I'm doing this because I'm growing or because I want to grow. I'm positioning for growth. And I think this is important because so many small business owners just find themselves overwhelmed, right? And we've talked about this in other episodes, all the different hats that a solopreneur wears. And there's just so much going on. We feel like we can't keep up with it all. And so many times, and I hear this a lot in, with the clients that I coach and consult with, they hired somebody because they were so overwhelmed, so worn out, they couldn't keep up with anything anymore. And so to them, the solution was hire somebody else so that I don't have to do all this myself.
Like delegation.
Right. Well, and they use the word delegation, but here's where I think it's so important to understand this. And it's a little bit tactical for this early on in the episode, but I'm going to go there anyway, because I think it's so important, right? Leaders sometimes use the word delegating, and really what they mean is dumping, right? Like they're not really delegating, and I don't even like the word delegating. I like the word empowering, because I think it gives a different connotation. But what a lot of people do is they hire somebody thinking, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't keep up with anything. I just need to get somebody in here so I can get some stuff off my plate. I would say that while I understand and am empathetic toward that feeling and that emotion and the motivation, because I've been there, it's not a good way to build your team. It's certainly not a good way to hire people, because it puts you in the wrong mindset. That's why I prefer the word empowering to delegating, because there's a huge difference between an owner saying, I can't keep up, I just need to get this stuff off my plate, compared to, I know where my strengths and weaknesses are. I know where I add the most value. And I know if I bring team members on who are really good at these things that either I'm not good at or I just don't want to do anymore, and if I'll empower them, to do it, and maybe even do it better and at a higher level than I ever did. Guess what? The organization is better for it, and I have margin now to spend time and energy on other things that really do move the business forward. And so it all comes back to that starting with the why. If growth is not your mindset, if growth is not your motivation, quite honestly, you're going to mess this up and you're going to have some problems down the road.
You know, when you talk about the difference between delegation and then empowering, it might just sound like it's just words.
Semantics,
right? It's
right.
just semantics,
Yeah.
but I really don't think it is. I think when you think of it as empowering, it gives you a mindset toward growth. So I think of like a high performance team, and it could be like a sports team, right? And the goal of that sports team is to win. But I also like to think of like a squad of Navy SEALs. And
who also want to win, just very different context. The stakes are a lot higher.
Very different context, right? And you know, that team of Navy SEALs could be anywhere between 4 and 10 people. It's pretty common. And I've got here a list of the titles, right? So you have the team lead, an assistant team lead, a point man, a breacher, which is it's a great image, right? You've got a sniper, a marksman, a medic, comms, a heavy weapons person, or a gunner, which is pretty awesome. And then you've also got the navigator. And if you think about the SEAL team, each SEAL team they're going to have their own skills, right? They're operators, as they call them. They all have this unique skill, and they're coming in, but as part of a team. And let's say the person who's in charge, the team lead, they are not thinking of each of those SEAL members as a person that they need to delegate something to. Not even close. They're thinking of it as one unit, and how do we grow this thing so that we can win?
Well, and I think that comes back to this idea of the why, right? I mean, and I realize in the military it works a little different. It's not like they're going out and recruiting, you know, in the same way that we are when we're building a business. But still, with each one of those roles, there's a very clear picture of why they are bringing that person onto that particular squad, because they want that high performance that they're going to get when everybody brings their specific skill set to the table. You know, I mean, it's what synergy is, right? It's like the sum is greater than all the parts put together, right? There's something that happens when you bring in highly skilled, highly motivated people onto a team. And that can happen at any level, regardless of the job description. We'll talk about that in a few minutes about, you know, what you're looking at. But I think it's this idea, again, it has to start with the why. Why am I doing this?
Matt, I like that. You have to start with your why. But here's what's interesting. I think that if you figure out why you hire, it often leads to who you hire. Something I like to think of in my stage, where I'm at in my career, is you hire for character and you also hire for skill. And so I think of it as 80-20, right? 80% character, 20% skill. From what I've learned, when I only hire for skill, that person typically just fizzes out in that role anyway. And so if you find someone who has great character, they show up, they're given everything they got, and then you can sort of help grow that skill in that area, they stick around. And so you know, the hard skill is the reason you hire them, but the soft skill is why they stay around. And here's, I think, a really common hiring mistake is you hire them because you like them, right? And so maybe because they remind you of yourself. And I think that's a big pitfall, especially for the early entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard it said, I don't know who said it. It might've been Dan Sullivan or, you know, one of the greats, but they said this. They said, don't hire who you like, hire who your business needs. And I think, you know, those are totally different frameworks, because I've done the same thing. I've hired people that I liked, and then I found out I liked them, but I didn't like working with them, right? Like, these are, you know, I mean, that's hire a friend, fire a friend, right? I mean, that's kind of the way these things go. And so, I think that it's a good thing to be mindful of: hard skill, soft skill, character, and skill set. And the truth is, we want somebody to come in who has the hard skills necessary to do the job. And sometimes we do overlook character in those early stages. And we're just excited we've got somebody who knows how to do what we need them to do. But like you said, if they lack the character, they typically won't stay around long. And this is a slower, more deliberate and intentional process. But what I have learned is that it's actually easier to take somebody who has high character and low skill and teach them the skill than the other way around. It's really hard to teach character. Like, if your mom and dad didn't do their job, I can't help you, right? I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to. I mean, you can help them a little, right? I mean, I don't like totally throw them out. You can help them a little, but I think generally character is formed way before they're coming into the workforce, right? And so it is easier to take somebody that has character and then build skill into them. But I think that idea of don't hire who you like, hire who your business needs. That's a really tough thing to swallow, especially in the early stages when you're trying to build your team, because you want to like your team and you want them to like each other and you want to create this great vibe and atmosphere. And those are all good things. You want to build a good culture. But if that's your only metric, you're going to run into challenges. And that's why I think it's so important to really have a framework for how you're going about the hiring process, because most entrepreneurs, and we've talked about this a lot throughout the episodes, like we can be emotional people, right? We get super fired up, we get super passionate, or we get super frustrated or whatever. And so I think, and maybe at the risk of painting with too broad a brush, I think entrepreneurs maybe are not the most trustworthy people when it comes to making hiring decisions early on until they've developed this. They kind of shoot from the hip, and both with the hiring and the firing, and that can be problematic on a lot of sides. So I think having a framework is super important. So here's the framework that's been helpful for me, and I've been through several of them over the years. I want to recommend Patrick Lencioni's book, The Ideal Team Player. I love all of Patrick Lencioni's stuff. I've read pretty much everything he's ever written, but this one was particularly helpful for me because of that. He lays out this framework for how to add people to your team, what you're looking for, and to boil it down, 3 characteristics: humble, hungry, and smart. Humble, hungry, and smart.
What size team do you think this is going to work best for? Hey, let me take a minute to introduce you to our very first sponsor. These guys are called God Armor. So if you're looking for a faith-based clothing company, something that you can wear that you feel like it really aligns with your values, you're going to want to check them out. We're going to put the website in the description below, along with the promo code. And if you use that promo code at checkout, you're going to get 10% off of your order. Go check them out. They're also a startup, small company just getting started, and we love supporting small local businesses. So again, God Armor, check out the website. You're going to love them.
It's a good question. Personally, I think this would work with any level team, with any size of team.
Okay, so like small company, 10 people, big organization,
totally.
150 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And I've led kind of mid-sized teams, anywhere from 10 to 50. And I've used this framework, and I have no reason to think it wouldn't work at a larger scale than that. Because what it does is it just gives you sort of this grid to put people through to say, do they have what it takes to work here? Right? Are they humble? Are they hungry? Are they smart? I want to unpack all 3 of those. So humble, really, you want somebody that's humble on your team in the sense that they're confident, but not arrogant, right? Nobody likes working with arrogant people, but you still want them to have confidence. And I think that comes when a person knows their strengths and their weaknesses. I actually don't like people who... I shouldn't say like people in the hiring process. I don't want people who downplay either their strengths or their weaknesses. I would rather them have a very strong sense of self-awareness. Here's where I shine and here's where I suck. Right. And just know that and own that. Like that speaks to me so much higher than somebody who they want to come across as not too arrogant. So they kind of downplay their strength, but they don't want to admit their weaknesses. So they don't really talk about that either. Like, man, just put it out there. That speaks to me so much more from a leadership perspective. And so
totally reminds me of all the interviews, right? It's
right.
Like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. Like, how do you answer that?
Right.
This is a good one.
My opinion, having interviewed a lot of people over the years, is the more straightforward and confident that you can answer and just own it, both on the strengths and the weaknesses. I don't have to play down my strengths because I'm freaking awesome at these things. I also suck at these things, and I would rather be honest with you about it than for you to, like, I'm hiding it. You're going to find out 90 days later. Like, come on. Like, you either want me for who I am and what I can bring to the team or not. And I realize like maybe I say that with a little bit of bravado because of my personality type, but it's always spoken well of the person to me when they could just know it and own it. And so I think, this idea of humble, I'm reminded of what C.S. Lewis said. He said, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. Right. And that's what you want on a team. Like I don't want people who think less of themselves, like, don't like Eeyore all around, but just don't be self-centered. Don't be egotistical. Right. So anyway, that's what it means to be humble. The second one is hungry. And I think we all know what that means in a business context, right? Like you want people who are constantly growing. They want to make a difference. They're going to make things happen, come hell or high water, never let off the gas. I want to get results. Right? Everybody wants that on their team. And I think sometimes we think of hungry only in the context of like the sales type of people on our team. I say you want hungry people at every level on the team. I think you want hungry people in your accounting department. You want hungry people in your administrative team. You want hungry people in your hospitality team. No matter what it is, you want people who want to go out there and get results. Because ultimately, if you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur. That's what you want. That's what moves your organization forward. And finally, the last one, and then I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to let you jump in here. But the last one is smart, right? Like we want smart people, and I don't just mean that like IQ in the traditional sense. Alex Hormozy talks about this, that intelligence is rate of learning. In other words, if all the conditions are the same, but I give you some different instruction, how quickly can you assimilate that instruction to change your behavior under the same condition? If you make your sales call this way, and I tell you, hey, I want you to change these 3 things in the script, and you're immediately able to do it on the next call, your rate of learning, your intelligence is a lot higher than somebody who has to take 10 calls before they can implement those changes. And so it's not like, are you a smart person from an IQ standpoint, but it's how fast can you adapt and learn. That's what intelligence is. And I think when we're building teams, that's what we want.
That's a really great definition. So Matt, we've talked so far about why you hire, and we've talked about who you hire, but here's a really interesting question. How do we make sure that we set this person up for success, right? This person that we figured out the why, we figured out the who, we went ahead and hired them. Then how do we make sure that we set this person up for success?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because you could do everything right up to that point, and then starting with their first day on the job is where you can screw everything up. And I've done this, and I've seen a lot of organizations do
like
this.
Like onboarding, or like, what do you mean?
I think onboarding is a huge part of it, right? Because that's the first impression piece, really, that the new hire has of working for your company. But I think there's a lot of times where what happens is we hire somebody who they passed all the interview stages, they answered the questions the right way such that we made them an offer and they accepted it. And then we assume, because they know their job title and maybe even have a job description and they have the skill set, they should just be able to come in and do the job. And in my experience, that is rarely the case. And the reason why is because what that job looks like in one organization is totally different than it looks in another organization. And so one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make when they build a team is that they don't really lay out what the definition of success is, what their expectations actually are. One of my leadership mentors, Dr. Mark Rutland, talks about this. In fact, he actually talks about it in his book called Relaunch. So we're throwing out all kinds of resources today. But here's what he says. He says, quality is meeting stated expectations. Quality is meeting stated expectations. And the reality is there is no objective standard of quality for anything in any industry, in any company. And I know when I say that, it sounds like a big statement, like, well, of course I know what, a quality car is, or a quality house is, or a quality, article of clothing is. But the reality is that's not objective. That's subjective based on the person, based on the consumer, because for one person, a Kia is a quality car, and for another person, a Mercedes is a quality car. And, for one person, buying clothes at Walmart is quality, and for another person, buying them at, Neiman Marcus is quality. And so I think we have to understand there's no objective standard for quality in anything in any industry, which means there's no way for a person to come into your organization and do a quality job in that role unless you as the leader have clearly stated what your expectations of that person and that role really are.
Yeah. But like you just said, leaders really do struggle with clearly defining what success looks like or just setting the expectation. There's a lot of like unspoken expectations, I think, and miscommunication as you're communicating to your team, right? And so we do have to overemphasize this part of the communication. And so I do believe that defining quality is the responsibility of the leader. Another interesting thing that I've noticed is that my best hires, they want to absolutely nail it. And so you say, here's a task, and if you don't give them clear instruction, they will come back to you and say, no. What are the parameters? What does it mean to nail it so that I can go do that?
Yeah. Well, and that depends on the person. Some people will, and some people will just say, in a vacuum of information, I'm going to define this for myself. And so, again, I think it depends on the personality type of the person, but either way, you may not get the result you want unless you've done your job as a leader. And that is the responsibility of senior leadership to define those expectations. So if you're watching or listening and you are in a senior leadership role, meaning you are the owner, the founder, the CEO, a department head or whatever, if you're the point person in this context, the buck stops with you. The responsibility is on you to set those expectations. That's not something that you can shirk. It's not something that you can abdicate. You have to do your job of defining the expectations if you want other people to do their job of meeting the expectations. And, as I coach and consult leaders and business owners, I hear a lot frustration with their teams. And this is a phrase that I hear all the time. Well, they should just know. They should just know. They should know what they're supposed to do. They should know what I want. They should know what is successful. They should know what it takes to make this place run or whatever. And I'm just telling you, they don't know. I don't care how good they are. I don't care how long they've been with you. They don't know unless you tell them. And you can tell I'm passionate about this because I deal with it all the time. And this is from my own leadership journey as well as helping so many people now. I promise you, they don't know as much or to the level that you think they do when it comes to meeting your expectations. And if that's the case, again, it's not their fault. It's your fault if you haven't defined that for them.
When you're consulting, Matt, what is something that you might offer or suggest to help clarify this to your client?
And I know this sounds, we're going to get into the weeds a little bit, like it feels like HR kind of stuff or whatever. Job description is a good starting point. And I'm actually not a fan of the traditional corporate job description, but I'm actually surprised at how many small businesses have nothing. They have no job description. Like they think that if you have this title, you should automatically know what tasks and responsibilities
and there's a big difference
are associated with it.
Yeah. Job description and role, right?
Right. Totally. Well, I mean, what it means to be a GM in one industry compared to another industry is totally different. Sales in one industry compared to another industry is totally different. And so I think it's not, frankly, you're doing your employees a huge disservice if you're doing that. But job description is a good place to start. There's actually a tool that I use in consulting called a 4x4. And so if that's something you're interested in, reach out to me and I'd be happy to walk you through that. But it kind of just boils it down to what's the role? What are the outcomes? What would make this person a hero? What would drive you crazy? How do you work through from your perspective as the owner, not a 3-page corporate job description that nobody can know or keep up with, not what's industry standard, but for you, for your company, what does success look like?
And I already alluded to this earlier, with your high performers, they're going to want to know what does it mean to nail it.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the best ways for that, especially a new hire, is to create an SOP. And an SOP is just the guideline.
You want to tell them what SOP means, just in case they're not familiar with the abbreviation?
Standard operating procedure.
All right, good.
And so this is really good for new hires. It could be good for low level. It could be good for high level, I think. But it's really just a guardrail of here are the things that you should be doing on a daily, weekly basis. And here's how to do them. And then, of course, high performers are going to just run with that. And they may come up with an updated version for you.
Right. Yeah. They may improve the SOP for you, but at least, like you said, it gives them the guardrails, right? Like they know where to run. I think I realize this could come across a little bit controversial, so I don't want to mean it in a negative light, but I would say that building a team and managing a team has a lot of similar parallels to parenting, right? If you don't give your kids boundaries, they won't know what it takes to please you as a parent, right? And actually, it's a huge mistake to think, well, I want my kids to experience freedom and all this, so I'm just going to give them no rules, no boundaries. Like, kids actually don't thrive in that. They actually thrive with parameters and boundaries and guidelines. Like, they will do much better with that. And I think the same thing is true with team members. And I don't mean that team members are children. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just think it's human nature to know, if these are the boundaries, if these are the guidelines, then I can run in this, right? I mean, it's like driving your car down the interstate, right? Like, if there are no lines, dotted lines, solid lines, no rumble strips, no shoulders, it actually makes me more tentative, right? Like, you're driving on an old country road. Like, I don't know, is this thing wide enough for two cars?
Yeah.
Like,
am I even in the ditch?
Right, exactly. Whereas, like, man, you're on the interstate, you can go, well, fast. I won't say how fast I go, but you can go fast because you know what the boundaries are. And I think if you want to build a high-performing team, you actually are better served thinking through where are the boundaries and the guidelines and what makes success. Your team will run faster for it.
Yeah, that's good, Matt. So to wrap here, hiring is really more than just delegating and offloading the things that you don't want to do, right? It's more about finding the right people and building your team. It's about the why, but it's also about the who. And so for those watching, listening, we would encourage you to think about your next hire in that way. It can't just be about taking things off your plate, but it really needs to be about growing a team that's going to take your business to the next level. Hey, we sure hope that this episode was helpful to you. Before you head out, please like, share, subscribe. If you can think of a topic that you would like to hear Matt and I talk about, drop that in the comments below. Share this with a friend, and we will see you guys on the next one.